Hello everyone, Lytro Storm here, and today I'm going to be talking about the Walking Dead video game. Nope, not that one. Not that one either. Tempting, but not today. Absolutely not. Look, okay, you all know what game I'm talking about here, right? The Walking Dead Destinies is a game that was released not that long ago. I know I'm a little bit late on this video, but you know, whatever. And it promised to be something incredibly ambitious. Have you ever watched a show and thought, oh boy, I wonder what would have happened if this guy didn't do this? Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, check out my channel. I cover that exact type of scenario in every video I do, pretty much. Or I guess you could play this game, because that's what this was supposed to be. The Walking Dead has so many moments where our characters barely avoid death, make good or bad decisions that impact the story, and various characters/events are always killing people. So imagine if you could make your favorite character survive, or have the main character be killed by his best friend instead of vice versa. Again, I did those ones, so you know, you check those ones out. And you can see how things play out due to that major or minor change in the story. So as I already said earlier, this game promised to cover what-if scenarios, and I was obviously intrigued for pretty obvious reasons, and I refused to judge it before it was released, but despite it being made by a company that's known for partnering with big IPs to make quick and easy games that are also horrible. I hyped up the different possibilities in YouTube Shorts, covered every ounce of knowledge we got from articles and trailers, and counted the days for it to release. And then it did. And I played it. And I knew every comment people left about how it was going to be bad were absolutely correct in that prediction. So now that I've gotten that little intro out of the way, I think it's finally high time I discuss this game in full detail. Here's why The Walking Dead Destinies should not exist. So you start off at the beginning of Season 1 as Rick Grimes waking up in the hospital. He looks around to see some pain meds, and then sees the don't dead open inside doors rattle a little, and all of a sudden realizes there must be dead people walking. How he managed to figure that out is insane, and definitely different from our actual story, but I mean, okay, sure. You escape the hospital as Rick, getting a brief tutorial on how to sneak, focus, roll, and use bottles to create distractions, with awesome lines like, I don't make any noise when I'm crouched.
I don't make any noise when I'm crouched.
I get that it's a tutorial, but when you see the way this game uses its voice lines and the other quotes it has, you'll be just as uncharitable as I am. After escaping the hospital, you get a black screen with a wall of text telling you the plot. Yeah, instead of actually showing or having the characters explain the story, we kind of just get a, hey, here's what happened before cutting to the next setting. And I get that it's hard to do a game centered around changing the story of a show while also replicating the story so we know what we're changing. But it's not exactly the most user-friendly thing to just put a wall of text for important moments and get back to the gameplay. Fans of the show are going to be disappointed because you're skipping over so much, and people who didn't watch it are going to be confused because this recap doesn't sum up everything and it doesn't make you feel any emotion. Once again though, it is kind of hard to adapt like a season 1 with 6 entire hour-long episodes into a game and then also change the story at the same time, but this just isn't the right way to do it. Anyway, we make it to episode 2, which despite the first episode being titled appropriately, has a title that has no connection because we're still in episode 1 of the actual show. Yeah, I don't know how 5 minutes of gameplay constitutes a whole episode, but okay. Rick runs into a walker, not the bicycle girl, not the teddy bear girl, just a random walker, and gets saved by Morgan shooting it. This is already a departure from Morgan's son Dwayne hitting Rick with a shovel, and Morgan killing a walker after. Hey, where is Dwayne? Morgan and Rick talk outside, since Morgan didn't take him in, and it's pretty standard stuff. But then Morgan says, you need proper clothes, and tells you there's a police cruiser just up ahead. Well, how convenient that the cop just left his uniform atop his car before leaving. And wow, they fit Rick perfectly. Huh, this isn't how I remember things happening in the show. Morgan then gives Rick a tutorial on how to fight walkers as he runs around the town looking for a working vehicle. He eventually finds one and Morgan wishes him well, saying that he's a good man. But Morgan, you've known him for all of 5 minutes. He's barely said anything to you outside of telling you the most basic things. This is nothing like the show, or even the comic where Morgan takes Rick in, patches him up, introduces his son, forms a bond that hasn't been forgotten even after a dozen years. They raid Rick's police station and Morgan stays behind with Dwayne. Where is Dwayne? I get that this isn't the Morgan show, that's Fear the Walking Dead, but like, Is his son just inside the whole time? Does he even exist? Now, technically, the same criticism can be levied at Telltale Episode 1 because Herschel's family is just inside his house except for Sean, who's the only important one, and none of them come out even when Sean dies. But like, yeah, I would say that's kind of weird. If you're going to have Herschel and Sean, why not show Herschel's family to make it feel more natural? But then again, Herschel's a very protective man, and he planned on sending all of these people away the next day, so why would they meet his whole family? But like, again, does Dwayne even exist? He isn't even like referenced or anything. If not, why does Morgan even stay behind while Rick leaves town? He only stayed behind with his son to try and put an end to Jenny and stick it out with the son. But okay, let's chill. These are just slight remixes to get us to the main portions of the game. I'm sure it won't happen as egregiously again. Anyway, Rick arrives at Atlanta in episode 3, which is back to being named after its canon episode. Only Guts was episode 2, but whatever. Rick never got his iconic horse, which is just another thing that gets cut. But I mean, it's just a horse. It's not like it's super important to the imagery of the franchise or anything. Rick gets into the tank, and now we switch characters to Glenn. Glenn makes a distraction for the walkers so Rick can escape, which is way more similar to the comics, as in the show, a couple characters help Rick get into their building. But at least it's sticking true to some variant of the story, so I'm okay with it. They make it to the roof, and we see T-Dog and Merle arguing like in the show. Only T-Dog's voice, it's actually the real actor. Very few actors reprise their roles here, which is honestly for the best. They don't deserve to be connected to this game. But it's nice that someone who hasn't appeared in so long got some more time to actually be part of the franchise again. Now, aside from T-Dog's actor returning, this scene actually does hold one of the biggest W's that this game has, in my opinion. And that is that Merle almost says what he canonically said bar for bar, which was insane if you know what I'm talking about. The main exception is that when he goes to say the word, T-Dog punches him in the face, but like, he actually starts saying it, which is more than I expected from this game, as I expected them to just completely gloss over the racism that Merle shows in this scene. But they go almost all in despite it being super easy to cut out, and I respect the authenticity there. Especially because people gloss over Merle's racism at the beginning of the series and just treat him like he was one of the best characters ever and he was actually a good person, when this was something that he actually had to fight against. And I think that him overcoming that with Michonne in the series is actually kind of kept in the background because they didn't want to focus too much on that. But that is something that he did overcome. So yeah, this scene was pretty much the only time I ever thought, huh, that was neat while playing the game. But here you get to make your first decision. Do you handcuff Merle for attacking T-Dog, or defuse the situation? Now, handcuffing Merle goes the same as it did canonically, but the latter is quite different, with Rick pulling a fence-sitting both sides approach, which basically signals that Merle shouldn't be punished for what he just did. And after everyone starts leaving, Merle handcuffs T-Dog to the roof, giving them an interesting dialogue exchange, which is really cool, and teases how Merle is going to make use of Rick's leniency. By the way, the group just leaves immediately after Glenn returns. What were they even doing there? Why is the episode called Guts if we never utilize one of the most iconic skills from the franchise, which is the namesake of the episode? And where are Morales, Jackie, and Andrea? Well, surely they're back at camp, where Shane leaves to find some supplies in the woods. I'm so glad someone left so many bottles and frag grenades out here for me to use. How nice of them. After this, we cut to Rick arriving and Lori dumping Shane. Here you get your first HQ. I'm sure it'll last a while. At this HQ, you unlock group conflicts, which are basically just arguments between your various characters, which are text-based. Again, no cutscene, hardly any dialogue, just text on the screen. But don't worry, regardless of who you say is right, it has no bearing on anything. You just get a couple skill points for clicking a button. These conflicts happen once every time you're in a campground. You can also talk to characters and hear Glenn let out a heavy sigh. Yep, this game can't even get spelling errors corrected. You go on a random mission that sometimes is a reference to the show, and sometimes isn't, but either way it has no bearing on anything. You just do it, and then the story continues. Except you don't do it, you're actually sending a member of your group to do it, and then while you do the actual mission, you make a choice for them to decide whether their job was a success or a failure. And it's once again just more text on the screen. But anyway, the playable part of this is Rick escorting Lori and Carl to the RV while fighting walkers, because yep, in about 30 minutes of gameplay we got through all of Season 1. Why would I ever actually watch the show when I could just speedrun it? I wonder if we missed any characters or plot lines though with that speed. Nah, I'm sure it's fine. It's Season 2 time, and we get our new HQ, Roadside. But walkers attack, Sophia runs away, and Rick goes after her. He's empty-handed after the mission, and Shane and Carl arrive in the woods. Shane shows his disagreements with Rick, which is different from in canon, but at least sends the same message the story was giving, and Carl gets shot through a deer. Rick and Shane take him to a farm where they meet Herschel. He sadly doesn't have the medical supplies to treat the wound, but he knows the school his daughters went to has some. Shane goes there and Herschel offers one of his daughters to show him the way. There are many problems with this. Number 1, why is Herschel willingly sending his daughters into a dangerous situation? He would never do this at this point in the show, especially with Beth being young. Number 2, how did Rick find the farm so quickly? He was literally just running around aimlessly. And number 3, who shot Carl? You want to know the answer to all of these questions? Otis. In the show, Otis shot Carl, led Rick to the farm, and then went with Shane to the school to save Carl's life. But in order to not add another character, make the story digestible, they cut him out and just stuck Maggie and Beth in his place. Except for shooting Carl. I guess someone just shot the deer in him and they never showed up to collect the deer or anything. Isn't that awesome? Speaking of, as Shane, you get to decide whether you take Maggie or Beth based on literally nothing, as we know nothing about either of them. But that doesn't matter. You explore the school and it's outside multiple times because they couldn't bother giving any sort of variety to their levels. Maggie/Beth runs in first, makes it inside, and then Shane just does the exact same thing. I wonder why he didn't just go with her. Surely you would have the two characters in gameplay at once, right? It can't be that hard, right? It was about this point when I realized that every character shares the same dialogue when in combat. They literally could not be asked even writing short iconic blurbs for different characters. They all just say the same things over and over, even in the HQ conflicts. After protecting Shane from walkers, Maggie/Beth then disappears while Shane fights a heavy walker. What is that? Just a brand new addition this game chooses to add. Oh boy, I am so immersed in the awesome universe that is The Walking Dead. Thank you for adding a random boss that I fought 10 times because there was a bug that literally stopped me from progressing after I won. Don't worry though, it's patched now. Shout out to the hard workers who made this game for fixing this bug only 24 hours after the game was released. After being allowed to continue playing the next day, you have your next big choice. Do you save Maggie/Beth or save the medical supplies needed for Carl? Whichever one you don't choose dies. Yeah, these choices are always super open shut and there's no ambiguity whatsoever. The trophies for completing these parts of the games are literally made a choice between T-Dog and Merle, made a choice between Carl, Maggie, and Beth. How creative and fun. I love knowing my choice will only have one impact and knowing what it is before I even make it. So yeah, Carl, Beth, or Maggie dies, and hey, remember when I said T-Dog and Merle could stay with the group? Let's see what they've done so far to make the game different. That way we can figure out what these characters will do if they survive and how that changes the game. Oh wait, Merle and T-Dog haven't done anything except stand around the HQ to say 2 lines of dialogue. And these characters will do the same. Sorry Carl, I know you're the son of like half the group, but I guess you only matter as an NPC to stand around. Oh yeah, also it doesn't really seem like Herschel cares that much that his daughters are dead, except for like the one split second they show of them standing at their grave. But anyway, next we play as Shane in a flashback, fighting his way out of the hospital as the military attempts to take over. This is actually a cool idea, and it's our tutorial on fighting other humans to get us prepared for Season 3. After that, Shane rallies the group to kill walkers in the barn. But first, T-Dog/Merle have to grab their axe from the shed, and also there are these walkers inside the fence. Somehow. You do this super tedious pull the box away in order to get to the next box you pull away segment, and it's very boring. Shane and Daryl then clean out the barn, so it's actually possible to have an NPC fight with you. I wonder why they didn't do that with the previous mission at the school. After that, Shane tells Rick that they made too much noise and they should check the fences for walkers, but it's actually a trap to kill Rick, which is happening the same night they cleared the barn, once again skipping over almost all of Season 2. At least it's like an hour this time though, as opposed to Season 1's 30 minutes. Here you make the biggest choice in the game. Do you play as Rick or Shane in this boss battle? This decides the main character going forward, so choose wisely. This fight has multiple stages and attempts to be an A Way Out style showdown with 2 best friends who are forced to kill each other after all they've been through. Except it's only been an hour and a half as compared to A Way Out's roughly 6. And A Way Out is much more interesting in terms of gameplay, which is kind of shocking to say. During this time, you hit Rick/Shane 100 times with an axe or bullets until they finally die, with photos of various characters popping up, with quotes that are supposed to emit some feeling. But once again, I've seen Shane on my screen for maybe an hour. And I've seen the show do this showdown infinitely better. This is just a ripoff of Abby vs. Ellie from The Last of Us 2, which, say what you will about that game, but I'd definitely play that again before this garbage. After killing your enemy, Rick/Shane guns down their walker and heads back to the farm, which is now burning down. But why is it burning down if Rick/Shane just made it back? Rick was the one who lit it on fire to keep the walkers out. Why are there already walkers before Shane/Rick shows up? Rick was the one who led the walkers there due to the gunfire. Also, you might be wondering, like me, if Dale is even alive since the game skipped over the episode with his death. But don't worry, he's alive. Unless you chose Rick, then he dies to a walker. But if you chose Shane, for some reason Shane is able to kill the walker, but Rick couldn't. I get that this is just meant to differentiate the paths because Shane is very little differences with Rick going forward, but I can't excuse it as there's no logical reason Rick couldn't have just shot the walker and somehow Shane could. Also, yeah, the group just accepts Shane after he killed Rick. Sure, they don't know exactly what happened, so Shane probably lied, but it's still sus. At least they removed the Randall stuff though, so that way there's no way to tell if Shane was lying, and we can keep him in the same role as Rick. What good writing. And we're now at the prison, fighting our way inside. Once we get in, we find the prisoners, or just one prisoner, Andrew. Except when he talks, he says we. Yeah, they basically just buffed Andrew as a stand-in for Tomas and himself, and scrapped Axel, Big Tiny, and Oscar altogether. You can choose to send away this composite Andrew, or let him stay in the prison. We'll get to this in a second because now it's time to play as Herschel, for the first and only time. After this, your choice of picking Shane or Rick will now decide whether Herschel gets to live, as Rick saves him and Shane leaves him to die. And it's here when we realize that Shane saving Dale earlier was only to balance out the numbers for when he lets Herschel die. So that's why Rick is not just able to save Dale, despite being in the same exact scenario Shane was. It's because he can't save Herschel and Dale. So while both of these moments for Shane are cool to see him save the guy he dislikes the most and leave Herschel to die, I can't help but feel it's cheap due to the forced nature it happens in. It's also funny that the subtitles tell us Herschel says Shane's name.
No, please, help me!
Like they couldn't even be bothered to have a character say Shane in order to differentiate the paths even a little bit. And of course, after Herschel dies, all we see from his grieving daughter is a text argument instead of a cutscene, or her being mad at Shane in dialogue. You could have easily had some sort of plotline where Maggie is upset at Shane, or Beth if you had her, and that leads to some sort of conflict within the group, maybe you lose a player, etc, etc. But nah, who cares about the story or characters being dead or alive? Shatter Fate, alter the story of AMC's The Walking Dead by weaving your own path through the series events, save the villain, kill the hero, and live with the consequences. Oh, huh. Well, next is the impact of your choice to let Andrew stay or not. But no matter what, he sets off the alarms and tries to kill our group. If you let Andrew stay, he ambushes and murders Carol, with Lori escaping since Carol went into the room first. But if you kicked Andrew out, he doesn't kill Carol. Maybe you could say it's because he had easier access since he was already in the prison, but if you sent him away, he likely had to break in somehow, which would have taken longer. However, there are major problems with everything I've said about this so far. We see in both versions that Carol and Lori were already in the room, so Carol went in before doesn't make any sense. And leaves me to wonder why Andrew also didn't just kill Lori. Was she just hiding behind the shelf and he, for some reason, thought she disappeared from the room despite knowing both of them were there? But hey, maybe he had a conscience that told him killing a pregnant lady wasn't a good idea. What a great guy for someone who murdered a woman in cold blood after being allowed to stay. Like, if the point is that Andrew was really an evil prisoner waiting to strike, then why didn't he go all in and kill Lori too? At the very least, Lori dies of a somewhat natural cause with her childbirth if you kick him out, and Carol survives. Every possible reason this could have made sense just isn't present. It's as simple as Lori and T-Dog died in the original events. Well, sir, T-Dog might not be here due to a previous choice, and you did tell me not to make any of these determinate characters matter ever again after one time. Fine, I guess Carol was lost and thought dead in canon. Just do Lori or Carol dies. Okay, sir, but how do we make that happen? I don't know, we gotta get this game out now, so let's do the next choice and figure it out later. But anyway, Shane/Rick kills Andrew. By the way, I know Andrew was the one who did the crazy plan in the original show, but that seems more like a dude who got left to die strikes back. In this game, it seems like he's more evil when you let him stay. And which of the prisoners from the show does that sound like? Tomas. But let's have a look at what Tomas's actor has been up to. Oh, yeah, he was probably too busy to waste his time, and they opted for an actor willing to be part of this dumpster fire. And that's not a slight on him at all, or any of the returning actors, as I love that they were here, and it was cool that at least a few people were willing to reprise their roles to make this game feel better, but it does still feel like a game grasping at anyone they could get to return and scrapping all the rest. Minus the huge characters like Rick, Shane, and the others who are obviously too important to selling the game to even think about cutting. And when I realized this, it kinda made sense why we were missing so many other characters in the past too. After this sad moment, the text recap says, "Our survivors wonder, why did it have to be her?" Wow. I love how vague it is so that it perfectly fits either Lori, the mother of the main character's child, or Carol, Well, yeah, she hasn't had any of her main character development yet because all of that comes after she feels totally helpless after being forced to let T-Dog die while she runs and hides. but that doesn't happen here, so the whole why did it have to be her is so stupid. The only one who should really have that kind of bond with Carol is Daryl, and with Ed being completely cut out of the game and Sophia being in such a more minor role than even the show, Daryl doesn't really have that time to bond with Carol on screen either. Speaking of Daryl, you now play as him for the second time in the entire game to find formula for Judith, but I thought Glenn and Maggie were the ones to do this in the show. So why not have Glenn go with either Beth or Maggie joining him? Daryl finds Michonne being ambushed by a group that has orders to kill her, so Daryl holds them off so she can escape to the prison and meet our group. We then get a flashback mission where we play as Michonne and Woodbury, and we're instantly greeted with the face of either T-Dog or Merle, who are now missing a hand. And they just stand there on the same spot for the whole segment. What an awesome reveal. And for some reason, their voice is so loud that you're able to hear them clearly even though you walked halfway across the town by now, and they're still standing at the entrance. You're also just following the governor, who moves infinitely slower than you can move, which is already annoying in normal video games, but even more so in a game I want to stop playing as soon as possible. Michonne determines from one conversation with the nice leader of a thriving community that he must be a bad guy and this place must be different from how he presents it. Both of these things are true, but she really just knows it's true despite little to no evidence. In the show, Michonne's distrusting nature was being contrasted by Andrea, who doesn't exist in the game. We believed Michonne was right because Merle was a bad guy before, and now he's part of this community. In this version, T-Dog, the random dude left to die because of racism, can be in Merle's place. That's definitely not convincing me Woodbury is bad. We also had frequent scenes of the governor's dark secrets in the show, with Michonne learning of them, making the governor's bond with Andrea seem all the more manipulative. None of that is seen here. Michonne just decides he's bad because she decides he's bad. Once again, perfect source material just butchered down into plot points with no real thought as to why any of these things happened in the plot or why they worked. Anyway, Michonne finds the governor's walker daughter and chooses to either kill her or spare her. If you kill her, the governor chases you out of Woodbury just like in the show, but if you spare her, Merle/T-Dog randomly jumps the governor and kills the walker. I guess they were just so surprised at this weird scenario that they instantly flipped on their boss. But what we realize here is that the choice to spare her now instantly makes the governor a good guy, and Merle/T-Dog takes his role. Michonne even cuts an eye out of whoever attacks her, solidifying the main villain of the game. This is a cool concept, having Merle or T-Dog be the bad guy, but once again, the problem is the execution. Instead of it being Merle or T-Dog, it's just the governor with a different skin. Nothing is different. Except now you have the governor as a good guy too, but he's instantly captured after playing him once. Rick throws out the "I'm grateful" line as a reference to one quote that has had more of an impact on the franchise than this game ever could. If Carol is dead, you play as Lori in the next segment, which is okay I guess, except the fact that this weapon cache Carol/Lori are trying to find has nothing to do with the original show. And why is the mother of a newborn going out on this mission? After that, we find out the reason it was Daryl captured was so we could skip ahead to the arena fight between Daryl and Merle, or T-Dog, or the governor. Except this boss fight is so easy, even in the confines of the game, where it has 3 phases, one of which the main villain gives your enemy a gun so they can kill you in a fist fight. And if it's Merle giving the governor a gun, I'm so confused as to why Merle hates Daryl so much. In the show, there was obviously some sibling rivalry and anger, but they both still deeply cared for each other. That was the entire point. The most interesting version of events is T-Dog as the governor because his actual actor returned, and we really see him going hard, and it makes sense for him, as opposed to Merle, besides actually having the governor as the villain. He wants Daryl dead because his brother left him to die, which is cool to have T-Dog be twisted into this villain role by what Merle did to him. And I totally predicted this in one of my shorts, by the way. Woodbury is destroyed by a group, which might have been a bit harsh, but it speeds us along to Season 4. Yep, Season 4. All of the people of Woodbury fled to the prison, which leads us to the prison flu mission, which is really just filler. It happens in the show, but here it's just one mission that Daryl does, because I guess all of the Woodbury survivors just turned instantly and Daryl kills them all on his own. Again, what an awesome addition to the game. But at least it prompts Maggie/Beth to go look for medical supplies with Glenn and Michonne. Hey wait, Glenn and Maggie looking for supplies and Michonne is there? Doesn't that sound kind of familiar? Nah, and if it does, I'm sure this game did it better. Anyway, Shane/Rick go back home to find weapons, and they find Morgan in his clear mode. For Shane, it's kinda cool because he's never met Morgan in the original series or here, but for Rick, it's just an infinitely worse version of the show's episode. Not that it's not a worse version with Shane, but at least it's not infinitely worse. The governor's men capture Michonne and Glenn since Maggie and Beth are both determinants, so we can't have them be important again. Merle/T-Dog/Philip arrive outside the prison with their hostages, and he has a tank. I guess he went through the Season 4 governor arc off screen. If only there was enough content there for at least one mission. Nah, I gotta get this game out ASAP, right? Shane reacts very in character, saying he'd rather burn the whole prison himself than let the governor take it, which is kind of nice, but that aggravates the governor to kill one of the hostages. It's here that you choose to have Glenn or Michonne give a similar speech that Rick gave originally, even similar quotes. But it's just funny because the acting is bad and it's such a bizarre scenario. Even the governor knows that, so he kills whoever gave the speech. Carol/Lori then have a mission where they shoot the tank and deal no damage. Daryl then happily drops a grenade into a tank with his brother in it, and this leads to the ultimate showdown. I will say, it is nice to have multiple choices interacting at once here. Shane or Rick can fight Philip, T-Dog, or Merle. But notice how this is like the 5th positive thing I've said so far in this entire review, and then realize how long this video has gone on. Rick and Shane then behead their enemy, and we get one last mission of Glenn/Michonne escaping. There we get a little montage of all our survivors leaving the burning prison. Do you have Glenn or Michonne, Carol or Lori, Merle or T-Dog, Philip or Herschel or Dale, Daryl or Maggie and Beth, or just one of them? Except sometimes Maggie comes back to life for the scene and you do have both of them. And is Rick/Shane alone, or with Carl? So pretty much every character in your cast is determinate to die, with the exceptions of Daryl, Andrew, and Judith. And they have a little sign that shows Terminus is out there too. Wow, I predicted the ending of the game too. And that is the Walking Dead Destinies' entire campaign, which is also the only playable mode. That was the main bulk of the video, but I wanted to touch more on the gameplay, which I only briefly talked about during the synopsis. This is a survival adventure game, which has the exact same gameplay mechanics as any other survival adventure game, except that it looks worse, and also is worse. Ammo is the easiest thing to find, despite one of the descriptions for the game saying that you have limited resources. I found myself maxing out my ammo at almost every station I got to. If you're about to die, you enter a broken state, which basically makes it so that you can only attack or only dodge, and gives you a few invincibility frames. But it's so annoying, as I'd rather be able to die and restart, or at least get some damage in instead of being forced to run. It's so stupid to limit your player's ability to play. If you were gonna copy The Last of Us and Days Gone, you should have just committed to that instead of this. And also, it doesn't help that, like I said, there's only, I think, 2 or 3 broken states, so like, it's not even enough variety to like limit you in like an interesting way. It's just, yeah, you lose this entire function or you lose this entire function. This game is ripe with bugs and glitches, which I've mentioned previously, but really, just look up the Walking Dead Destinies glitch and watch or read the insane stuff that happens. Like I said, Maggie comes back to life, and other stuff happens that's just so stupid, it's terrible. And yeah, I'd recommend that instead of actually buying and playing the game. The game also uses skill points as its currency, which can be found all over every place and are given to you as a reward for certain tasks. Your job is to use these to buy skills, which are mostly just percentage buffs for various combat skills, as this game doesn't really have much to it other than combat, which I already said was bad. You have to spend these points on skills different characters have. Well, not really, they just have the ability to buy the skill. If you buy one skill for a character's skill tree, it gives everyone that buff. But the catch is that you have to buy a character's skills before they die, or it becomes locked off. So for the governor, you might never get his skills, since he could never join the group. It's not a bad idea, but yeah, I've said the same line a lot, haven't I? As for the graphics of this game, I was never one to bash on them. When the trailer dropped and everyone was hating, I said not to judge it since the game wasn't done yet. They even said at the bottom that the trailer isn't reflective of the final product. And then they said the game was releasing in like 2 months, and I started losing my hope. I also did research into the company making the game, which I addressed earlier. But even if the game looked bad, it could still be good. There are plenty of old classics that don't look great, but we still love them. The graphics are some of the least important parts of what makes a game good. But the entire rest of the game is garbage and failed to deliver on almost any of the things it said it would. So now I'm completely comfortable saying how disgusting this game looks. At its best moments, it looks okay in gameplay, but the cutscenes, the close-ups of the characters' faces, it's so bad. It doesn't help that very few of the cutscenes are even actually animated. They just go frame by frame with dialogue over top. None of the choices in the game really make differences besides cosmetics, which is incredibly stupid given how the whole point of the game was to make it so you could choose how the story goes. But you can't really do that when you cut out countless characters and chop 33 hours of content down to 4 hours. This game could have been longer. This game should have been longer, or I'd be saying that if it was actually enjoyable. Because the mechanics in the game are garbage, the graphics are garbage, and the gameplay is garbage. I'm so glad I had a PlayStation Plus discount to make this game cost $45 instead of $50. And I will let you know, I hate people who complain about game prices because generally games are good. Even if you hate Gotham Knights, for instance, it does still provide tons of play hours, a decent story, nice gameplay mechanics here and there, and it looks pretty good. If you disagreed with any of these, at the very least, the play hours point was correct. If it took you 40 hours to 100% Gotham Knights, that's less than $2 an hour if you bought it for $70. If you buy Destinies, you can 100% it in about 6 hours, so even if you got the discount I did, you would be at $7.5 an hour. That is atrocious. Once again, people who complain about the cost of video games are kind of annoying just because like dollar to hour ratio of like enjoyment is going to be really high. But for Destinies, I am totally content with saying that this is a terrible buy and it isn't worth your time. Just go buy yourself some fast food for a few days instead. There's only one reason to play this game, and it's not because it's at a good price, or fun, or unique. It's if you're a fan of The Walking Dead who wants to consume all of its content. Because if you aren't, you won't understand any of the story, you'll barely know any of the characters, and you definitely won't want to watch the show or play the other games afterward. It completely butchered the source material, which I can understand wanting to change the story a little to make it more fresh and enjoyable in game form. But remember that the entire point of the game was to alter the story in the first place. It's like doing a time travel story to change history, only for it to be a reboot, meaning things are already changed. When you look at just how much this game cuts from characters to plot lines, it's so blatantly clear that this was just a cash grab, banking on the big The Walking Dead logo. The list of characters are on screen, but in terms of plot lines, we have Morgan and his wife, Walker Guts, the CDC, every Andrea plotline, which was essential to the Governor story, Randall's group plus Rick's first kill, Rick going insane, every Tyrese plotline, the Governor's Season 4 plotline, which seemed to have happened off screen, and Rick learning peace. If the game has no narrative value, why even make it? This is so pointless. And it's sad because I honestly think this game had potential if it was in the hands of Telltale. They've already started expanding to have some sort of combat and travel in their games with The Walking Dead final season and The Expanse. At worst, maybe they could collaborate with a different company to cover the actual gameplay and leave the writing and choice elements to the kings. Because say what you will about the character I saved died 5 hours later, what the hell? At least it's better than having the character surviving only be a background NPC who does absolutely nothing. Or the main staple of the game, Shane or Rick, who do you pick? And literally, it only has like one dialogue difference in the entire game. Shane and Rick are so different. Why? Hell, I'm willing to bet you could cut Season 1 and 2 into a better game if you actually took the proper time to make it good. Let me know if you guys want to see a video where I try to write the first 2 seasons as a choice-based action game. If I see lots of support on this video, I'll be sure to do that at some point. For some reason, the comic universe can get awesome games like The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners and all of the Telltale games, but the show just cannot get a good game. Survival Instinct, The Walking Dead Onslaught, and now this garbage, which I think is even worse than both of them. Because say what you will about Survival Instinct, they tried to make it at least interesting. You get to send characters on missions and do all that cool stuff. Really makes me want to replay it, even though I know it's not going to be good. And at least Daryl and Merle, I think, are pretty in character from what I remember. In The Walking Dead Onslaught, while you could just play Saints and Sinners 1 or 2 for like roughly the same price and it's way better, at least it's in VR, so it's like a little more fun because of that. The Walking Dead Destinies is such a stain on The Walking Dead's legacy, and I absolutely despise it. It makes me so sad that it even exists. Because, I mean, if you guys are fans of the channel, you know I love like what if stuff, and I love The Walking Dead, obviously. So to have both of those two things collide for the first time ever, and probably the only time ever, it makes me so sad that it doesn't deliver on anything. It's not The Walking Dead, and it's not a what if. It's nothing. Except for $45 down the drain. But yeah, that's about all I have to say about this game. That's why The Walking Dead Destinies shouldn't exist. But you know what should exist? You. So that you can become a channel member and get access to awesome perks like exclusive community posts, early uploads, and other awesome stuff. You can be like these people: LA to Plug 2, Hazy Brush, Marco de Cinco, Davisville 84, Willie, 23 Days Later, Aiden Kearns, Zombie Warlord, Yeah, Tifue, Joel, and Chief Constituent. But as always, tell me if you liked this video, comment your requests for future videos, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.